Welcome back from our reception outside. On this fifth anniversary of HAI, I want to thank so many of our supporters, especially our founding supporters, Steve and Roberta Denning here, Reid Hoffman and Michelle Yee, and Bob and Dottie King. We could not have done any of the important work that you heard about from HAI over the last few years without their support, but also importantly, their advice of how we could pull this effort off. So we want to really thank those folks who helped us start this. Thank you. I now have the pleasure of introducing our provost. Jenny Martinez is provost of Stanford University and the Richard E. Lang Professor of Law at Stanford Law School. She's a distinguished scholar in the field of international law and human rights. Her expertise encompasses international courts and tribunals, the laws of war, and international human rights law. Provost Martinez is well known for her work on the legal implications of global issues and has been a prominent advocate for human rights and social justice on the international stage. Prior to her appointment as provost, Provost Martinez served as the dean of the Stanford Law School, where she emphasized interdisciplinary education and the integration of technology and law. Her leadership has been instrumental in fostering an inclusive and innovative academic environment. Provost Martinez's career is marked by her commitment to academic excellence, public service, and the advancement of human rights. Please join me in welcoming Provost Martinez to the stage.
Thank you so much, James. And a warm welcome to everyone. I'm so pleased you could join us, and I hope you've enjoyed today's programming. I've heard incredible things about the panels and discussions. It's hard to believe that it's been 5 years since Stanford HAI was created. It feels in a way like it was yesterday and also like it's been here forever because it's become such a part of the fabric of Stanford and of the national and global landscape around AI. In the 5 years since it was created, the technology has expanded exponentially. 5 years ago, we were only just beginning to realize its potential to transform our society. And now AI has extended its influence into nearly every aspect of our lives, changing the business world, creative endeavors, healthcare, government, food production, my own field of law, and of course, education. AI development has been on an extremely fast trajectory, and the pace will only accelerate in the next decades. It's been an amazing journey from when Fei-Fei, one of the godmothers of AI, gathered around her kitchen table with John Etchemendy, our incoming president, John Levin, and other campus leaders to envision Stanford's role in human-centered artificial intelligence. That vision led to the creation of HAI, the first institution devoted not only to the innovation of this cutting-edge technology, but also to engaging policy, industry, and society to ensure that artificial intelligence is developed with humans at the center. The creation of HAI was and is fueled by some of Stanford's most generous and visionary supporters, many of whom are here with us this evening. That vision is founded on three main principles. AI's development must be guided by its human impact. Applications of AI should enhance and augment humans, not replace them. And AI technology must be inspired by human intelligence. In just 5 years, Stanford's HAI has surpassed its founders' expectations, making significant impacts in policy, research, industry, and education. Looking back, we can see how visionary the founders were to advance a human-centered research approach, emphasizing ethics and responsibility. Today's programming has highlighted some of those amazing accomplishments. So, where do we go from here? What does the next 5 years look like? I know that all of you here in this room are intensely engaged in that very discussion. One of the issues that I do know we're facing is that AI research and development is dominated increasingly by industry, And that comes with some challenges. There's the danger for universities like Stanford to lose talent to industry. AI models have become larger and more complex, and the ability to work at scale gives industry some advantages. And industry's focus on commercial applications often fails to prioritize broader knowledge dissemination. So what role can Stanford and HAI play in the future of the field? To solve big problems, we need team science, and Stanford's interdisciplinary approach to research is one huge benefit. Remaining at the forefront of AI requires innovation, creativity, the things that Stanford is known for. Collaborations with industry, foundations, government, and others, bringing together new resources for AI with the mindset of a university, a focus on positively impacting society and educating the next generation. I'm excited by the possibilities such collaborations might have on the future development of AI and for educating the scholars of tomorrow. There's no question this is an exhilarating time for the field. And Stanford's role in keeping humans at the center of AI development is critical at this juncture. It's a responsibility that we as a university, with our goal to benefit society, must take on. In closing, I'd like to congratulate the HAI team on this milestone. I'd also like to thank everyone who's made it possible: faculty, students, staff, researchers, our partners, and very generous supporters. I'm looking forward to the next 5 years of accomplishments and can't wait to see what comes out of that. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Please enjoy dinner, and the panel discussion will begin at around 7:30. Thanks.
So we're pleased to have renowned journalist and best-selling author of the recently published Burn book, Kara Swisher, here tonight to moderate our Godmothers of AI discussion. Please join me in giving Kara a warm welcome.
Hi, everybody. Oops, look at me, I'm short. But she writes tall. Anyway, I'm so excited to be here tonight on this country club of Stanford University. I always like coming back here. I know, right? I walked in, I'm like, ah, still beautiful. Hellscape, California, as they like to say on Fox News. Anyway, it's beautiful, and I'm very excited actually to be here. I make a lot of trips to California. I live in DC now with my giant family, but I also still have a house in San Francisco, and I love coming back here because I spent so much of my formative career here covering Silicon Valley and spent a lot of time at Stanford. So it's a lovely feeling being here, and I have lots of amazing memories. But let's make some new ones with this panel tonight. I'm going to get out of the way and let these women speak, because one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time, and everyone's been spending a lot of time writing about, is where AI is going, which the dirty little secret, it's been here a long time, and there's a lot of people that have been responsible for its development, especially women like Fei-Fei Li and many others. So tonight we're going to have some of AI's earliest as well as current female scientists. I know it's going to be hard for you all not to have an entire panel of white men, but you'll have to deal with it on some level. Join us to look back and look forward to their accomplishments and contributions in the field of AI. Joining us live via Zoom is Daphne Koller. In addition, we're going to have Barbara Grosz, Corinna, Cortes, and of course Fei-Fei Li. And by video, we have Ruzena Bajcsy. She's contributed some videos for us. And so we're going to kick off at first. I did a really amazing interview with Fei-Fei Li when her book came out a couple months ago, maybe 6-7 months ago, for my podcast On with Kara Swisher. And so we're going to continue the conversation for a few minutes and sort of do an update and see where we go from there, and then we'll bring on the other panelists. So Fei-Fei Li, come on out. So we talked, about 6 months ago when your book came out? It seems like an eon ago in the AI world. Let's talk a little bit about, we want to talk, of course, about the extraordinary women who made an impact in AI. But this is called we hear a lot about the godfathers of AI and their contributions. We don't hear about the godmothers. And one of the things I spent a lot of time doing is saying, don't you know about Fei-Fei Li? And I'm trying to talked to a lot of people about you and your contributions. I met you many years ago when you were doing ImageNet, and you've been working on it for over 20 years. I'd love you to sort of give a brief perspective of where we've come from and where we are right now, because it does feel like time is expanding at a quick rate.
So, Kara, first of all, I'm just so excited this panel is actually a plural, and the plural is the godmothers of AI. And so I'll be sure this panel is not about me. Actually, many of the women we will meet, some of them you've already met, are my own personal mentors and heroes when I was a student of AI. So you're right, AI has come a long way. Someone today actually, it was Mark Andreessen, has reminded us AI is a field of almost 80, 70 years old. And it's a field that took a while to come of age. And what we know today, the taking off of the past decade is what we call modern AI. And the reason we differentiated modern AI from the previous generations of AI is the convergence of the three critical elements. The specialized parallelizable computing chip, which we call GPUs, the neural network algorithms, as well as the big data that has converged around a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, namely the moment of the ImageNet challenge in 2012 is really the beginning of modern AI. So we have gone a long way. But I really, really want to make sure we get all the women here, because the name Godmothers of AI, honestly, people ask me, do you like that word? And I would say no, because I would never, ever call myself godmother of anything. But you saw that during the ChatGPT years. As the field took off, suddenly there's all these godfathers of AI. And they really did a lot of great work, some of them. But
who wouldn't that be?
She's being a good journalist. No, but some of them did great work. But suddenly, women are suddenly forgotten. Last December.
Because that's never happened. But go ahead.
Yeah, right. What a surprise, right? Yeah. Last December, New York Times has this list of people who made modern AI. Literally, not a single woman was on it.
I know. Well, you know what I did?
What did you do?
I started tweeting about it, saying, where the hell is Fei-Fei Li, you assholes? And then I had a list of others. But talk about, you were very early in the field, and so you should, I think you should. It's very hard to have to say, look at us, right? Look at us, but in fact, look at us. Talk about the field when you entered it and now. Obviously, we're in a Cambrian explosion period, as happens in tech a lot of the time. So can you talk a little bit about when you first entered the field versus what has changed now besides the enormous amount of money, which is massive. I think NVIDIA now is this
3 trillion today?
I think it might be the biggest, most valuable company in the world now, by now, at this moment. Way ahead of its skis in terms of its revenues, but nonetheless, here it is. So talk about when you first entered the field to what you see happening right now.
So for many of us, we're in an academic setting. I define the moment, the official moment of myself entering the field as a graduate student. And that was the turn of the century. And we were smack in the middle of an AI winter. So meaning the public doesn't really hear about this word. The federal funding is relatively small, and it's not a hot field. It was a niche computer science field. But what was great about the AI winter is for those of us who entered the field in the AI winter, we followed our curiosity. It was a pure scientific love for the question of intelligence or machine intelligence. And that's how I got into the field. But again, I do want to say, and I said that in the book, even when I entered in the early days of 2000, when I read the important papers and contributions of AI, women were there. There is Daphne Koller, who's online, who was become my personal mentor when I came to Stanford. There was Corinna Cortes, whose work in support vector machine was seminal and groundbreaking. There was Barbara Grosz, who were at the forefront of natural language processing. There was Ruzena Bajcsy, who was one of the most pioneering women roboticists, and there are many others. So the field was start to it was a quiet period, but there was a lot of intellectual activities. Mm-hmm. But then gradually, AI start to come of age, and the three factors start to converge because of my own work in ImageNet, because of a bunch of scientists led by Jeff Hinton and Jan LeCun's work in neural network, and because of NVIDIA's work in GPU, we start to converge. And then industry entered. Industry entered around I would say the second decade of 21st century, right? So ImageNet moment was 2012, so industry entered around that time, or AlphaGo, many of you will remember that's 2016. And then the wheels start to turn. Investments start to come in, business opportunities start to come in, AI as a product start to have an impact, and then we start to have companies like OpenAI got formed in 2016 or 2017, and fast forward, ChatGPT happened. And that was the inflection point. AI, at that point, AI became a public, it's a public moment. The whole public woke up. Governments woke up. The entire industry woke up. It's no longer that AI that was so privately quiet for myself. It's no longer just that field where only me and my curiosity, it's a much more public field now.
And a financial field. We're going to bring everyone on in a second, but how do you feel about this public moment then?
We talked about this, Kara. As my book says, it's a force of nature, it's a phenomenon, but at the end of the day, it's a responsibility. I belong to the generation of scientists, some of them will meet more of them, who brought this technology to the public. It's our work that contributed to this public moment. And I deeply believe that we have a shared responsibility of harnessing and guiding it to do the right things. So I don't belong to the too extreme camp of dystopia. I actually had a public debate with Jeff Hinton about that last year. Mm-hmm. I also don't believe it's all roses and rainbows. It's this technology, just like all tools, have the positive and negative side, and it's our responsibility to make it right.
All right. Well, with that, let's bring in the other panelists. Why don't you all come out? Barbara, Corinna. Yeah, come on up. So we're going to ask a number of questions, and we'll have some questions from the audience too. And Daphne is up there. Hi, Daphne.
Hi, Daphne.
And then we'll have a video from Bajcsy. We're going to have her come on with just a video itself. Ruzena Bajcsy. All right, Barbara, let's start with you. I can't see you. There you are. She just came in from Israel, and she says she's tired, but she looks as lively as can be. So let's ask the same question to you. You're known for research in natural language processing and your contributions to the advancement of women in science, among other achievements. So what's your perspective on the advancement of AI, NLP, since you've entered the field and now? How are you looking at this moment? She was calling it a public moment.
So in 1973, when I entered the field, research was largely rooted in logic. Language research drew mainly on that, linguistic theory and psychology. Work in these fields typically cited as evidence, made up examples of individual sentences. Computer systems had little memory and were slow, and they crashed a lot. Our goals were to understand people's linguistic capacities and to build systems that could match those capacities. There were, however, a significant number of women in the field who had come from linguistics and psychology, as well as from computer science and math. I was interested in getting computers to interact more effectively with people and to work better with them, coming from work I'd been doing on getting computers to do more interesting things with kids in education.
Why is that? Why did you do that? Why was that your interest?
Because I was going to be a 7th grade math teacher when I left college because, well, you'll hear in a minute. Anyway, I'd been working on that, and SRI, a local research institute, recruited me to work on the dialogue component of a speech system because everybody knew to do speech you needed to understand dialogue, but nobody knew quite what that meant. There was no data, not a little data, there was no data. There was no empirical paradigm. So one of my first contributions was to design empirical studies to learn how people actually might talk to a computer system and to analyze it. There was great excitement because we were working in uncharted territory. So now everything has changed. First of all, AI works. It's doing great things. The generative models are rooted in statistics. There's a large literature on empirical design. And thanks to Fei-Fei's pioneering work, there's a lot of data now, and people recognize how important it is. We heard about that all day. And it's, again, exciting, uncharted territory. The goals are also different now. Generative AI models are a different way of interacting with computer systems. They're not really the kind of dialogue we envision, like human dialogue, but they're also not programming languages. And I think you get a sense of what it's like to communicate with them when you realize that there's this new phrase and job opportunity of prompt engineering. So the prompts are language, but it's not the kind of language we would speak to one another. And people who work in human-computer interaction will tell you that it's not at all like that. It seems kind of like a guided, sometimes collaborative, search for a solution. Okay, so where is the field and where is it going? So first I have to tell you, in 1977, I had a conversation with a fellow PhD student who was finishing. And I agreed with him when he said, in our lifetimes, AI would never have be of any commercial interest.
Wow.
He went to work for Adobe, and I stopped making predictions. So rather than predict, I'll just point out 2 things that I think are issues and 2 hopes I have. So the data still suffers from not being diverse enough and not being inclusive enough. And I'm sad to see that many language researchers actually don't know anything about language. They know a lot of statistics. I'm also happy that Chi is different from that. And I think it's another thing that's really, really important here. As for my hopes, first, I hope that along with building better models, AI researchers will work on others on the problem of, in some sense, verifying the results of those systems, taking inspiration from the work on software verification and understanding that you need to know that the results your system produce can be trusted. And second, I hope that anyone who develops a system based on generative models will consider not only what the system could build, what system they could build, but what system they should build. And here I'll refer to what James Landay said earlier today, taking account of the impacts on communities and societies as well as individuals.
So can I ask you, do you think that's where it's headed?
Do I think that's where it's headed? I said I'm not making predictions.
I know, but I'd like you to. Looking at,
I think that
leaving aside glue on pizza, that's about trust and whether it's real or not, which is a good media joke and everything else, and also kind of strange and creepy. But how do you look at it right now, this moment, given the rush of money and interest in it?
I think I appreciate this question. First, I want to say I think Chi has a really important role to play here because academics and industry meet. I wish there were more Chis in the world, but there aren't more Stanfords in the world, so I don't know that that's going to happen. And, you know, I was at Harvard, where I never could get them to do this. Sorry.
I wasn't going to point that out, but thank you.
I know. I tried. Years ago, we started a Center for Research on Computation in Society, but Harvard didn't want to invest in it. I think we need to understand how to build incentives for businesses for business so that they will take ethics seriously. I did start an effort at Harvard called Embedded Ethics. We integrate teaching ethics into almost all of our basic computer science courses. I'm happy to say Stanford does this now too, as do a large number of other universities. So my hope is that we're going to be producing more people who go on in computing and think about the ethical consequences from the very beginning of when they're doing design. And I'm pleased to say that I think this next generation of students cares about this.
I would
So
agree.
that gives me hope.
Yeah, I would agree.
We
I
just
would
have to
say
get the old guys to understand this.
or just die. But go ahead.
Wait, hold on. Barbara is too humble.
I'm teasing.
Barbara is too humble. I need to give her more credit. Her embedded ethics in CS course are the most pioneering program. This was the first in the country.
Right.
You did it.
First in the world.
First in the world. And when HI was established, one of the first thing in our educational program we looked at was Barbara's course in embedded CS. And I'm proud to say Stanford High did follow Barbara's footsteps. But again, these are the things that we really need to give a shout out to people
Absolutely.
doing things like this.
And I do agree with you that the younger generation does care a lot about it. I wrote a piece about having ethics in computer courses 20 years ago and was laughed at by a lot of people. But it's critically important given how
Yeah, so the undergraduate students who were taking a course of mine on intelligent systems design and ethical challenges hounded me until I did something about it.
That's great. Corinna, I'll turn to you next. In addition to being,
I think we have to turn these
Yes,
chairs a little
all right,
bit
please.
because
Oh,
I
good.
can, you know,
oh, she's a can-do woman.
this is better. Now I can see you.
Oh, good. Hi. I'm not
Yes.
sure you want to. In addition to being a competitive runner and a mother of two, you are a computer scientist, well known for research in machine learning. It would be great to hear your perspective on the question, coming from someone who's both academia and working in the industry. You are currently at Google. I
Yes.
know Fei-Fei was at Google also.
Yeah, we met during
We
the
met at Google,
Right,
yes,
yeah.
because, yeah.
So from your perspective, where has it been and where's it going, given you shift between them? Because one thing Fei-Fei talked about with me is the idea that industry sucks everybody from academia and there's not enough ability for academia to keep up, and you referenced it.
Where has it been and where is it going? Let me first say that I have been in machine learning for so long, since probably 1980 something, so not as long as you. But back when I started in the area, we called it only machine learning because AI was kind of a four-letter word. That was, and I still probably think of it primarily as machine learning and not as much the application space of AI. I was in a very interesting group. I actually always been in industry. I was in Bell Labs, the same group as Jan was there. Yosha came there in the summers, and Jeffrey Hinton was also frequently a visitor. So we had these different areas of machine learning. I was doing the more convex optimization of support vectors, and they were doing the neural networks. And we went through a phase where neural networks, they faded out, right? And kernel machines, they were the thing that everybody was writing about, and now we're in a phase where neural networks are back in action, but I really expect that in some years from now we are going to hopefully see more algorithms. Back then we had a wealth of algorithms. Today it's sort of very narrowly focused on these deep learning algorithms, and maybe there are a few decision trees floating around here and there, but besides that, I think that is very sad that we made it to that point. So when that'll happen, I'm not going to be making any predictions about, but where I would hope to see the field go over the next years. First and foremost, back when I started, indeed, anything about fairness and bias in the data, privacy or something like that, we didn't even think of it. So I still think we don't think enough about it. So very high on my list is this notion of that the user should be comfortable with what we do also, and I really hope that we can eradicate some of the fear of AI that is out in the public right now. Maybe one day we're going to have AGI, but where we are today, the models are really not where anybody, if we could just get to introduce them to people, to get them in their hands so they could feel them, I think we could get a lot of this fear out of society.
It's probably science fiction because of what they've been.
Yeah, and from the universities and from industry, I have a hope for, on the algorithmic side, that we are going to make the models smaller, still as powerful as they are today, but smaller, so also all universities can train them, that it is not just something that the big companies, they can be doing. Models that can go on your phone and they can get a feeling, get a hands on. So we also educate this way, that we get a better understanding of what data is actually needed. We don't need to train on all the data we're training on today, right? If we could get a better understanding of in what order do we have first to train on the easy data and then the harder data and for different domains. So these are some of the areas, and then the smaller architectures and better understanding of what these models they actually do. To be honest, back when I started, we were much more principled, and I feel, try to go to one of these machine learning conferences, there are sections called deep learning theory, and you go in there and it's, I hate to say, it's one big cooking class, right? It's like we connect the fast layers and the slow layers, and we got to do it this way around, and that's called the theory of it. Now we have to get back to a much better understanding of what the models actually do. Also, if you want to address things like factuality, where are these hallucinations coming from? So I have a long list of things that I hope the algorithmic side of the world will take care of. And then on the application side, we have to show the world the value proposition of these models, right? I'm sure you heard a lot, I'm sorry I couldn't be here during the day, but a lot about initiatives in education and in medicine. But I think actually, one of the bigger aspects is climate. I recently went to a summit where climate researchers and health people came together from the whole world. And these understandings of that a little bit rise in temperature dramatically changes the cardiovascular diseases and the infectious diseases, the vector-borne diseases, where they propagate to. And when they come to a new population, the population has no immunity compared to where the diseases they were before. With a little bit of temperature change, the crops that you cannot grow on the fields anymore, how do we find the right crop? The understanding of these things, so that's where big data and some AI and a lot of optimization, understanding how all these factors, they play together for our health and our economy, and not leaving whatever the global south behind. That's really where I hope that some of these applications would go.
Climate change in this is not
understanding what are the implications of climate change and what we can do. What is it for crops we can grow now? So we don't have to do a full experimentation, but we can be a little bit more informed about what we're doing.
That's really interesting. Daphne, thank you for joining us above. There you are, okay. Virtually and late your time. I'd like to turn to you next. In addition to your academic involvement, you've also have an impressive track record of leadership and contributions to a variety of companies, including Coursera, Calico, Insitro, Engagely, and more. Let's have your quick take on the field right now and where it's headed, what moment we're in right now, this public moment, as Fei-Fei referred to it.
So I think Fei-Fei's side, you're following a really interesting historical progression of when each of us got into the field. Fei-Fei, of course, having started, but is actually the most recent of the four of us. I got into the field actually in the late 80s, early 90s, and I think I was there for that kind of beginning of that inflection point where I began to move away from that, more logical reasoning, expert system type approach, and really grew to embrace what I was doing, which wasn't AI when I started. I was doing statistical machine learning probabilistic models, which weren't actually considered to be part of AI at the time that we started. It was that AI grew to embrace that field. I mean, and at the time that I entered the field of AI, as we heard, it wasn't, AI was a 4-letter word. I think that's exactly right. It was what my teenage daughter calls sus. Cognitive, you had to say you were doing cognitive computing or statistical learning or something like that. You couldn't say you were doing AI because it was kind of really fringe. And then AI started to take off, actually, sort of during my time as a faculty member at Stanford. I was the program chair of the NeurIPS, where we hit 1,000 attendees for the first time, and we thought that was huge. Now they're capping registration at 15,000 because there's just not enough space. So I think there's just been this exponential transition that I was kind of a witness of for the very beginning, and it's actually quite amazing to see that influx into the field from so many people, and the excitement and the progress that that gives rise to. Although I'll come back to at the end why I think that there's also some risks with that, and some of those themes have already been hit on. And so thinking about what I hope that we can do with AI, with this incredible engine that we've built, is that in addition to all of the kind of consumer-facing applications, the chat bots and the better search and giving you better cooking recipes and all those, things that make the general public so impressed with the AI capabilities, I hope that AI will also be used to solve really hard, important societal problems, and really deep science problems, if you will, or sociological problems that we currently are unable to solve as human beings. We just don't have the capabilities and tools to do that. And when I think about the key ingredients that are going to be required for that, I would point to two. One is data. And of course, we talked about Fei-Fei's pioneering work in highlighting the importance of data. I actually made a transition to AI in service of life sciences back in the late 90s because they had more data back then, more interesting data in terms of some of the earlier genomic data and the human genome and so on and so forth. They had better data, more interesting data than we had in AI back then. Now, of course, has drastically flipped. And the regime that one lives in when you do hard science is often a relatively data poor regime. And one of my goals in what I'm doing is to think about how one can address that data impoverishedness and really create the kind of data that will enable us to solve really hard problems. Unfortunately, I think others in other disciplines are creating tools that enable data to be generated, collected in much more scalable ways. And I think that will help us solve the data gap, but only if the technology that is being created is deployed in the right way and in the right hands. The other gap that I think we need to address is that, I don't think in many of those fields in any time soon we'll have the kind of web scale data that we have that feeds the large language models in natural language. And so people are still going to have to deal with building models in cases where the data are limited and noisy and partial. And one of the things that has gone by the wayside in a lot of the way in which we train young AI researchers is the need to think. To really think about your problem and to really understand it. It's become so easy to take data and shove it into your favorite machine learning model, and out comes something that is often quite good. And so you don't really have to sit and think about the problem and how to tackle it in the right way. And we used to have to do that a lot at the time that I was growing up in the field, because data was limited, problems were hard, and we needed to think about how to model. And I think that we should be, if we want our researchers to be able to solve these really hard problems, thinking about our problem and how to map it in the best possible way to a machine learning problem is one of the skills that we are not doing a particularly good job of teaching. And so when I think about, where that could lead. I think that AI does have the capacity, and that's kind of getting to the hope part of this. I think AI does have the capacity to form a new foundation for really hard scientific problems, whether it's new models of fusion, whether it's climate change, whether it's the space that I'm working in, biology for health, whether it's sustainable agriculture. And I really would like to echo Eric Schmidt, who recently said that he believes, and I believe that too, that AI will be to biology what calculus was to physics. It is a first time where we can have a formal foundation that can make really interesting, important, valuable predictions that will allow us to solve, to really leverage biological systems to do something better than they would be inclined to do naturally. And that has incredible implications in human health and sustainable agriculture and in organisms that might help us get rid of some of the carbon that we've spewed into the environment, or plastics and so on. And I think that we wouldn't be able to do this without AI. And so I hope that some of the people will really help us do that.
That's a very positive outlook for that. Before moving on, we'd like the audience to hear from one more important voice. Look at the screens, please, for Ruzena Bajcsy about her pioneering experience in AI. It's just a very quick video.
Hello. My name is Ruzena Bajcsy, and I have been very fortunate that at the invitation of Professor John McCarthy, I came to Stanford, the AI lab, in October 1967. I was the number 2 woman who attended this lab. Barbara Liskov was the number 1. You ask my perspective on AI at that time. As John defined the AI, and he was the director, and he also invented the name artificial intelligence that previously was the same subject or problem set was going under the word cybernetics, invented by Norbert Wiener from Vienna. And this was the name that was very prevalent in Europe for this subject. But as John explained to me, in order to get the funding from the United States military, they asked him to distinguish the American effort from the European efforts and give a different name. And so hence John invented the name AI. For him, the AI, and I accepted that, was all about how do we represent in the digital computer the knowledge about the world, about us, about our interaction with the world. And so it was all about knowledge representation.
Okay. So I want to move on. Being godmothers of AI certainly comes with many challenges and obstacles. I'd love each of you, just in a short manner, to talk about some of the challenges in your personal journeys and stories of things that have made a difference. And I think the difficulty of being a woman in a field dominated by men, I just would be curious about what you found challenging, what you found hopeful for you. Why don't you start?
Well, first of all, I'm lucky that even when I entered the field, I had these incredible women I look up to. Some of them I never met in person, but their work has inspired me. So I wasn't the first. I mean, Ruzena is such a pioneer, right? Frankly, in the earlier days of my career, especially as a graduate student and a young assistant professor, I wasn't aware that much about a gender differentiated difficulty. Doing science was riveting, but it was challenging. ImageNet didn't work for a long time. People didn't believe in it, but that wasn't specifically about, oh, you're a woman scientist. You know, it was just the challenge that comes with scientific inquiry, and I accept that. I embraced that. I do think the time has changed a little bit now. I think with the field become much more, how do we say this, public, and lots of money, lots of attention, and the good old human, you know, I don't know, human vices, I don't know what's the word for it, does creeping a lot more.
It's greed, but go ahead.
It's, I actually look at my students who are a newer generation from me, and the people of different walks of life, especially the underrepresented students of all backgrounds. I actually think they have a tougher time than I did. Because the field, when they go to that 15,000 people conference, when there's now an implicit competition of who is louder on social media promoting their work, who has the connection, it's actually tougher. So I worry about the next generation. But in the meantime, like Barbara said, the next generation is feisty, is fearless. They see the world in much more multidimensional way than we had. Like Corinna said, we never took a class on ethics, and so they also inspire me. So on one hand, I feel their challenge. On the other hand, I also believe they'll find their way, and they'll make the future better.
Barbara?
So when and where I grew up, it was just taken as a given that women couldn't do math. I encountered no women scientists until Susan Graham chaired my Quals committee in 1972. Noam Chomsky told me my dissertation problem was very interesting, but I would never make any progress on it because you couldn't formalize anything having to do with human dialogue. John McCarthy told me that understanding human language and how humans talked was irrelevant to AI. And at the place where I worked, a manager told me that my work was okay, but I was no John Doe. Actually, John Doe was an actual person, but I'm not going to say what his name was.
How did you take those comments?
Well, my seventh grade math teacher, who was the first person to tell me that girls could do math, and encouraged me, also told me years later that he knew I would succeed despite such things, because whenever I got knocked down, I just stood up and tried again. So I guess that's how I took it. More pervasive then was that many times my ideas were ignored, only to rise again when offered by a male and be heralded. It took many more years for my accomplishments to be recognized as for my male peers. And many of them forgot to cite my work.
Oh yeah, that does happen.
Some of them even said intentionally they did it because they were afraid they wouldn't get funding if they cited my work. I was the first tenured professor in the engineering school at Harvard ever in its then 70 years. I was
woman?
The first woman tenured ever in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. There were, ahead of me, 24 women faculty. There were only 4 tenured women in science. So, I did that first report on women in science at Harvard, and people asked me why I only did junior faculty and graduate students. And I said, well, if one of the tenured women faculty got sick, we couldn't even play doubles tennis. So, what was the point?
As you were wont to do, but go ahead.
Actually, interestingly, most of the tenured women in science had some athletics in their background.
Okay.
Since you picked up on that. But I was also lucky. So in addition to my 7th grade math teacher, I had a manager that I worked for who was very good at promoting me. And I have a Stanford story for you. I was meeting with students admitted to Harvard for undergraduate education, and one of these students came up to me and said, "I just saw you in a photo in Gates Hall at Stanford." I said, "Really?" And so he told me to ask Hector Garcia Molino for it. He sent it to me, and there I was in the project headed by Geo Wiederholt. I was the only woman in the photo, and I remember being in that group and being completely a member of the group and included and respected and everything. I had no idea that I was the only woman in the group. So there you go. There's some, and I think, and you'll hear this later, I think that getting the men to work on this problem is really important. So many of these challenges have gotten better, but as Fei-Fei pointed out, some of them are coming back. Women's work continues to take longer to get recognized and often not cited as much. And even when women reach leadership positions, they're treated differently, and both in academia and in industry. So I think we still have work to do, all of us.
I actually started out in physics, where all the professors were 200 years old, and they were brilliant minds. I had many Nobel Prize winners as my professors, but they were clearly from a different generation and very, very kind, but they would say the most outrageous things in between, like, you know, this is what happens when girls, they get into physics. I think I was actually also the only girl in my class there. I didn't expect them to say anything differently. They were from a different generation. My expectations were not for them to treat me differently than what they actually did, but I was very upset with my other students in the class, right? I had expectations that they should speak up for me, but I would never have been upset about the professors. So I tried to manage my expectations throughout my life and just not think that I would get more than I did. And with the background in physics, and everything was just beautiful. Later on, I got to computer science, where the professors were actually modern, and I could never understand really why the other girls would maybe feel sometimes that they were left out, because, you know, with my expectations and my background, this was very nice. I was very lucky also to end up in a group at Bell Labs that had, we were 3 women, Isabelle Guillon, who is not here today, but also one of the early people, and Sarah Soya, which was really my big mentor there. She was a very strong woman. I'm sure that Daphne, you remember her very clearly. She's in Chicago now. And her strength and the way that she carried herself taught me a lot. This group I was in was extremely competitive. I mean, with Jan and Joscha and Jeff Hinton, and then Vladimir Vapnik was there. I mean, this was a very strong group, and our manager was wonderful. I don't know how he actually managed to get us together, but he did. But he was also very energetic and upbeat, and every morning he would be going around to all the offices and, what's new, what's new, what's new? And as a young student, you feel like, you know, I can't say that I haven't made any progress. But Sarah, she taught me so many things, like how she one day then put her hands and said, there's nothing new today, and there will be nothing new for a long time. And I have, that I carry with me, because if we want to do research, then we cannot do this incremental hill climbing every day. We need to carve out space for ourselves that we can actually think through the problems. And she could do it, I can do it. So this is having a strong female mentor has been everything for me.
Absolutely. Daphne, why don't you finish up, and then we're going to get to the final question and a video from Ruzena.
So I was very lucky because I had very supportive parents, and I also went to college very early. So even though I was one of the very small number of female students, I was also very young, which made me different in so many ways that the fact that I was a woman really didn't get noticed. So I walked through my early career in this blithe, complete ignorance of the fact that there was gender discrimination. And where it really started to come home to me was when I became a faculty member, and subsequently when I became an industry leader, when I started noticing all these microaggressions, ranging from idiotic things like, being addressed by a random undergrad student in an email to myself and a colleague as "Dear Daphne and Professor so-and-so." It's like, I don't really stand on ceremony. I'm fine being addressed as Daphne, but why the difference? Or my quote favorite examples is when I was at Coursera and I was introduced to a Fortune 50 CEO as, "Please meet Daphne, Coursera founder and CEO." And I emailed in response saying, "Great, would love to meet with you. And my assistant James will help us coordinate." And the email I got in response was, "Dear Daphne, could you please confirm James's availability for a meeting on so-and-so?" Which was kind of striking. So, these microaggressions are really, I think, still with us. They're still endemic. And so I'm going to echo Ruzena's comment and say that this is a problem that still exists and that we still need to solve. And it's not a problem. It's not a problem that I think the victims of these situations can address on their own, because it's very awkward when your idea gets ignored, when conversation goes around the table and then a male colleague says the same thing and suddenly, "Oh, John, what a great idea. What do you say?" "I said that 5 minutes ago." It sounds so petty. And yet at the same time, there's no, otherwise you don't get any recognition for your work. So I call on every one of you in this room, and especially those of you who are men. But when you see this, say something. Say, "Oh, that's a great idea, John, and thank you for building on Ruzena's comments from 5 minutes ago." And I think that's...
We're going to play a video of Ruzena, another video, and she, to hear her experience as someone who's been in the field since receiving her master's degree in 1957.
The older professors looked at me with great suspicion. What can she do? And I remember when I arrived, there was the director of the Moore School was Brainerd. He was a very old-fashioned white male who lived in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And he, after a few martinis, he came to me and said, "Dr. Bajcsy, what's wrong with you? Why are you not married and somewhere in suburbs with 2 children or so?" And so I said, "Well, because I choose not to." At that time, I was divorced. And there was since I was the only woman in the department for a while, now my chair, Arvind Joshi, was very supportive, in part, I think, because his wife was a professional in medical school, so he understood that women have also drives and interest in intellectual endeavor, but the rest of the senior faculty were not. They kind of tolerated me, but they were look at me with much greater suspicion. What can she do?
All right, we're going to finish up, and then we're going to two or three questions from the audience. Can you, very quickly, in 30 seconds each, reflect and share what advice you would give to future women in AI? Fei-Fei?
Be fearless. Ignore, just pursue your North Star. Be passionate, be curious. do not let any of these let you down, and seek your true passion and seek support, but really be courageous and fearless.
Don't be discouraged too easily by the skepticism of senior researchers. Remember what I said about Noam Chomsky. Persevere despite negative feedback from peers. I had people tell me if I just thought harder, I would be able to solve a problem the way they did, and then they turned around and did what I was doing. What can I tell you? Most importantly, as Einstein, among others, said, real advances in science come from asking new questions and proposing new ways of addressing challenges. Don't settle for incremental progress, and it's okay to break away from the methods du jour. And I have two hopes for you. You'll always keep in mind the people in communities whose lives will be affected by the science you do and the kinds of technologies it might enable. And when citing prior work and making recommendations for awards, appointing leaders, don't overlook women or underrepresented groups. And that's advice for all the men here, too.
You said all the right things already, so I'll just add to it that get yourself a study group or have a tight net of people. So if you are insecure, if you feel that maybe my idea is not good enough, always have some trusted people that you can first debate it with and build it out. And then they can't also really steal it from you because they've been part of it. So it has been very important for me always to work in groups.
Okay, last one, Deb.
Echoing many of the themes, work on really hard problems that you find inspiring, set your sights higher than you think is feasible, because even if you don't make it, you'll get higher than if you aim low, and don't let people tell you can't do it.
Great. That's really, it's so great. It's so interesting what you said about math, because I had a teacher tell me I couldn't write when I was in 7th grade, which was a similar thing. So I couldn't do math, though, that was for sure.
That's your teacher's problem.
I understood that at the time, even at the time.
But you can now just get a little AI thing, right? That'll help you with the math.
AI is still not good enough. You guys have to work on it more, because it really does suck, frankly. And then I also had a doctor told me I'm gay and said I probably couldn't have kids, and I have 4 kids. So, oh well, guess they were wrong. So we're going to have 2 questions from the audience. Do we have a mic? Is that correct?
Thank you. I just really adored this wonderful session. Thank you so much. My question is that with the incredible experiences that each of you have so heartfeltly shared today, I couldn't help but think very deeply on how each of you and together as a platform, you could design something for this gender bias, in addition to all the wonderful work that you're doing in AI and being the role model for everybody, which my daughter, Fei-Fei, she sends a love to you as a Sailor group. But you know this gender bias from a personal experience, so I'm curious to see if something generative might come out of that. That was my thought. Thank you.
So can AI fix sexism?
No, people have to fix sexism. It's a people problem, and people have to fix it.
That's essentially, is there a way, Barbara?
Well, I wrote that first report on women in science. Then when Larry Summers stuck his foot in his mouth, I did a whole task force.
That's like any other Tuesday for him. But
And here's the bottom line. It takes constant vigilance by everybody to make this go away.
Yeah.
AI fixing it at all?
No hope for that for a long, long time. Also, there's been a lot of men creating that AI, right? So let's not think that there's nothing magic about AI, so it cannot fix it. It is really what we just do in our own environment, and if everybody does their fair share, then we will get to a better place.
Daphne?
I agree. AI amplifies who we are, and it amplifies the best of us and the worst of us. And specifically, as we've seen, it can amplify very bad behavior. We have to fix people first.
Right, that's true. But Godmothers, the movie Her. No, sorry. That had a sad ending. Just remember that. Just remember, it was not a good ending. One more question, I think. This guy right here.
Really Really great commentary. You mentioned, Barbara, I believe, Einstein. I was listening to an article on NPR that talked about someone who was studying Einstein's brain. And in the report, they mentioned that his wife actually was the one who did much of the work. But they credited Einstein with a lot of it. But he actually wrote a letter and said it was Mileva who he kind of learned all of the stuff about, and she pulled him into. Are you familiar with that? And could you speak on that? And then I guess the second question was, were there any Black women in AI that we have not heard about from 50 plus, 60, 70 years ago?
There have been very few minority people in AI, and even now are not nearly enough. And I don't recall any from the early days. I don't know that particular Einstein story, but that story is not unique in the history of science. Many men got credit for work that their wives did, and many women had to pretend to be men, for example, George Eliot, in order to even be able to write.
And it's no accident we have Ada Lovelace somewhere
Down there.
in this panel. Even, she's the only person who is not in the modern ages, but we should remember her for her founding work in mathematics and leading up to computer science.
Okay, I'm going to take one more quick question because we are running late. One more, last one. Right here.
Thank you. It's really great to see you, Barbara. Yeah, I really appreciate your work on embedded ethics. This is not my question, but like I just wanted to add to the question just before. So, I mean, you probably know that one of Megan's heroes is Joy from the Media Lab.
That's right, Joy Buolamwini.
Yeah, right. She is a black woman in research of AI. She found the bias in the facial recognition algorithm, and I think it's a really great example that people, underrepresented minorities, have a strong interest in creating this equitable world and make those kind of amazing progress and accomplishments. So I think it's another reason to
That's a very
encourage
good
more
person to
people.
note. I did a great interview with her. If you want to listen to it on my New York Times, when I was at the New York Times, I did a great one with Joy Buolamwini. I think she's coming out with a new book soon. She's really terrific. And that's a really good point to make. Do you have any question for them?
No, I just wanted to make the comment.
Okay, all right, good point. Good point. All right, let me have one question, last question for them, and make it good. Right here. Then you really, right here, you have to make it good. You got it? Okay.
Make sure.
Good evening. Profit, greed are pieces that all of you have talked about, and we talked about it earlier today as well. If you were to create an award, an honor, something other than that, what would it be, and how would you do it?
Can you repeat the question?
If you were to create an award...
If you created an award for something other than profit or greed.
Right.
What would you celebrate?
In AI, not
in
just,
AI.
Not like for the best movie or anything like that. Okay,
No,
good.
we've got the Cannes film stuff for
What
that.
would you value? What would be the award created beyond you made the most money, you're worth the most company? Because that's where it looks like it's headed.
So I swear I didn't pay for you to ask this question, but it's HAI. That's the world we created. It's not built on greed. It's not built on profit. It's built on our collective belief that this technology should be human-centered. We should approach it with curiosity, passion, ethics, and just honesty, and include everybody. And that is the reason we're here, and that is the world I wanted to create. And I didn't pay her to ask the question.
Anyone else, like the Noam Chomsky Award for being wrong, that kind of thing?
No, I actually have a somewhat allergic reaction to awards, so I would take all of that money and try to create more HAIs.
Okay. Anybody else?
Thank you, Barbara.
I would like to give an award. It doesn't have to be with money for the work that makes the greatest impact in making the world a better place.
Yeah.
Well, in that vein,
I would give it to find really good ways of handling climate change, make the society.
Would agree. Well, I would give the award to the godmothers of AI. Thank you so much. And again, give them another round of applause.
Thank you, Tara. And one thing we cannot finish this evening without thanking the staff. This entire Stanford, HAI, Hoover, and many, they have worked tirelessly for weeks. So all the staff in this room, please stand up. We need to give you a round of applause. Thank you.